realize if you're Carolina, this has to be an extension of the Duke game. If you want to win this game, you have to play nearly perfect, unless Virginia just has an extremely off day, which you shouldn't bank on that. You need to come in ready to go for this game, almost just as ready as you were for that Duke game. Look, I know there's different stuff that goes into that rivalry, but this is a ranked matchup. This is a chance to get a ranked win on your resume the first of the year. And, I mean, look, you're looking at the back half of the schedule, and you know that there are, a lot of opportunities here, but they're really tough tests. If you can find a way to steal one like this, I think this gets you feeling really good about games like Virginia Tech that you have coming up on Tuesday, Louisville, which is at the end of the next week, and then even when you sort of turn over into Florida State and Duke to finish up the season, that's where I think Carolina, if they can win this game, it will take all the pressure off of them. At that point, you would feel they're probably locked into the NCAA tournament unless something just wild happens. Pretty much, unless they turn around and lose that game to Boston College, they will probably make the tournament if they win on Saturday. So I feel like that's the mindset that they have to take going into this game. And look, I think that this game is very winnable. I feel like, this is the ACC in 2020-21. But like I said, you're going to have to play one of, if not your best game of the season to do it.
Yeah, no, I think for sure they'll have to play their best game we've seen them play. And I think it all starts and it all ends with Caleb Love. I'm not saying he's got to be the Caleb Love we saw against Duke, although if I can get that version of him, well, I'll be honest, I would love that. But he has to be the most dominant, or not the most dominant. He's got to control everything Carolina does on the offensive end, because we all know how important in this game, how important every possession is magnified when you play against Virginia, because they're going to take the air out of the ball. You're going to slow it down. You usually get about 70 to 80 possessions a game in college. You can bank on getting about 60, 65 if you're lucky against Virginia. And that's just it's a much bigger deal than I think most people realize it until you get into the game and then you look up and because trailing by 4 is really like trailing like 8, and trailing like 8 is more like trailing like 12, and so on and so forth. And so I think you've just got to see Carolina be at their best. They can't turn the ball over at a ridiculous rate, because if you turn the ball over the way they can, which is 17, 18 times a game, this game will be over at halftime, and I'm not lying. But if they take care of the ball, we've seen them at times be a very competent team in the half court, but it all starts and ends with Caleb Love. Am I wrong to think that if Carolina's going to win this game, the freshman point guard's going to have to play really well for them to do it?
No, I mean, it's definitely part of it. You're I would say indirectly you are pointing at him when you're talking about the fact that they have to hold on to the basketball. He has 5 turnovers against Duke.
Yeah.
That's been a problem for them at times this season. But, I think he's going to have to come out and play a really, really good game on the offensive side of the ball. I think he also, needs to do a good job against Kihei Clark on the defensive side of the ball of not letting him, get to the lane as easily as he can against some of these opponents that they face.
That's a good point.
That'll lead to some of those kick-out shots. You need to avoid having that happen to you again. Remember last year, you got killed by Thomas Woven Tensai, which sounds like, that sounds like a guy that sells I don't know, Sham Wows on television. That
does
not sound like a guy that should be beating you the way he did last year. And I definitely think that, look, man, if Caleb Love can continue to elevate his play, I don't think that he's got to be the guy that we saw him be against Duke. He does not have to come out and have 25 and 7 or else they're going to get blown out.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily what has to happen because I think other guys around him are going to have to play probably their best games of the season if you want to win this game, especially those guys inside whoever it is that plays. I'm looking at Garrison Brooks mainly. But I do think that, he has to come out and have another good game. And, I think, if he can hold on to the basketball, other guys are going to see that. Hopefully that can elevate their ability to hold on to the basketball. I think that's one of the big things. I've talked about that a lot in the games when they played Syracuse because mainly it was against the zone. But in this game, your ball movement is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hold on to the basketball? Can you move the ball without turning it over? You've got to be able to make smart passes because like you said, Virginia is still a team that can take the air out of the basketball. They will slow the game down. So if you start turning it over a lot, all they're going to do is put you in the half court. They're a much more efficient offense, and they're going to give you less opportunities to score the ball, something that Carolina doesn't like because, look, they had a pretty efficient game against Duke. This is still a young team that is still working through some things on the offensive end. They are not the most efficient offense, so you need to be able to take advantage of every single possession that you have. And I think, look, earlier in the season, if this was a game that was played in the start of conference season, let's say this was one of like the first 3 or 4 games they played, I would be extremely concerned about their chances in this game. I think now, with where they're at, how much they've grown, I think there is a little bit of confidence that Carolina could come in here and pull the upset. I still think that, and rightfully so, most people will pick Virginia to win this game, and it's still a game where if you lose, it is nowhere near the end of the world. But it definitely feels like where Carolina's at now is a much better spot than where they were earlier in the year. They're built to handle this type of game a little bit better, and it all starts with Caleb Love and whether or not he can take care of the basketball and continue to play the way that he has.
I don't disagree that Carolina is much more prepared for this type of game than they were in the beginning of January or even the end of January. This team's won 7 of 9. We've seen them take a lot of steps in the right direction in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I still don't think they're ready to go on the road in a building that's going to have some environment because, believe it or not, there are fans allowed in Virginia.
Can't play high school football in the state of Virginia, but you can sure play college basketball with fans.
Right. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not as a fan, I'm going to be extremely ticked off if they lose this game Saturday because of how bad I want to beat Virginia. As a podcast host and a writer, I'm still going to tell you it's not the end of the world. Because I think this is a really good measuring stick for where Carolina actually is. Because while the win over Duke is big emotionally, it's not what it means in past years. Duke's 7 and 8. That win is not something that's going to really boost your resume and help your seed line when the committee eventually seeds the NCAA tournament. But Virginia, this gives you a chance, a lot like Florida State, where you went on the road and you competed. Albeit you got beat, but you played them for 40 minutes, so you're capable of playing with them. I think that's for Carolina is just proving to themselves that they can go on the road against what's become the best team in the league and give them 40 minutes and live and die with the results. I don't question that when it comes to this team. This team has never once, I thought, laid down and got their butts kicked. Last year's team bent over willingly at times and allowed a team to blow them out of the building. I'm not worried about that with this team, but I have a hard time thinking Carolina can go or is going to win the game. Here's how they can go win the game. Carolina averages 42.6 rebounds compared to 31.7 for Virginia. Offensive rebounding and converting second chance points is as almost important in this game as not turning the ball over. Because if you can find a way to beat them up on the glass and get second chance points, that's probably going to be your best version of offense in this game because they're going to lock you down in the half court. If Clemson can lock you down, I don't want to know what Virginia can potentially do to our half court offense. So I think that's why, again, with the time with all this COVID stuff, if you don't have Armando Bacot and Day'Ron Sharpe suited up for you, that's added pressure on Walker Miller or Walker Kessler to come off the bench and give you something. You'd probably imagine Sterling Manley making his debut, Walker Miller on the court. But we're stressing Caleb Love because guard play and these types of games mean everything. If Carolina is going to win this game, doesn't it feel like you're going to get 2020 version of Garrison Brooks where he puts the boys on his back and he gives us some superhero performance and leads to some kind of victory? Or is this going to be more of a team effort kind of thing?
I think it's got to be a team effort type of thing. I mean, you're hoping that Garrison is going to be part of that team effort. You're hoping that he's the guy that's going to come in, maybe be able to give you the type of game that we saw against Syracuse, to give you maybe that start that we saw against Duke, and maybe even extend on it a little bit and be able to carry it over into the second half as well. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a team effort. I feel like that's just how this team is built, though, too. I don't really feel like this is a team that is going to look to one specific guy to take over in a game. If it happens, great. It's happened at times so far this year, a couple of times with Armando Bacot, a little bit with Garrison Brooks, and then, of course, we saw it a little bit even with Caleb Love against Duke, especially late in that second half. But I feel like, I would be shocked if this is not, multiple guys scoring in double digits if they win. Multiple guys scoring in double digits, Kerwin Walton having a good night, R.J. Davis playing probably one of his better games of the season, maybe Leaky Black, another game like we saw against Duke, where relatively efficient night for him, maybe not a ton of points, but still efficient. That's what you're going to have to see. And some of those guys that haven't chipped in on the offensive end may have to, because they may be playing bigger minutes, like you talked about. Walker Kessler, I think, is the guy that you look at the most as the guy that probably will see his role expanded, because I just don't think that they're going to push that aside, especially, with them being the ones on camera. They're not just going to push that aside and let those guys go without any sort of punishment. There will probably be, at the least, some minutes taken away from them. So Walker Kessler will probably see a bigger role in this one, and he's got to get back to being that guy that we saw earlier in the year. Even if he can chip in 6, 8 off the bench, that would really help Carolina in this game. But, I think that Garrison Brooks is definitely a guy that's got to have a good game in this one if Carolina wants to be able to pull out the victory against the Cavaliers on Saturday.
Yeah, I like the way you took that my question, where it's got to be a team effort. This feels like a win, or a game that if Carolina wins, those guys that get a lot of criticism but have been big for Carolina in spots this year, Leaky Black, Andrew Platek, they're going to have maybe not big games, but just they got to have big moments where when we need them to make a play or two, they're going to make those plays. Ultimately, I don't think Carolina wins this game. I do think they will lose on Saturday, but I do think it'll be a lot like Florida State, where we come out not getting the result that we wanted, but seeing progress still being made on the court. And even though the schedule is getting tougher from this point moving forward, still seeing a team that's going to be competitive in the ACC.
Yeah, look, Virginia is definitely getting to the point, at least in our minds, where it will one day probably fall under the NC State Duke type of pick rules that we have.
Yeah.
That you will be required to pick Carolina in this game, because it's just gotten to the point where Tony Bennett and the Cavaliers are frankly just too good. So it's just going to be one of those things where either you pick Carolina or you're fired from the podcast. But realistically, this is a really, really tough game for Carolina. It's a lot to ask. I mean, look, even with how crazy the ACC has been, as much parity as there's been this year, this is what we expected from Virginia. We figured that eventually they would settle in and find a way to sort of take over this conference and beat the teams that they're supposed to beat. I mean, look, they dropped that game to Virginia Tech, but this is still a team that's playing really, really good basketball right now. So I think that this is a lot to ask for Carolina, especially with the fact that, they did have an entire week off, which is because of their own doings, but it's still, there might be a little bit of rust that they have to knock off early on in this game.